So what chapter here?
So we are just wanting to connect a little bit with this area, waiting for a few more people to be coming along. We're here in the spring of Avedat. You can see the little waterfall.
And the book is...
And Numbers chapter 13, it talks about how the Israelites, the children of Israel, the Israelis, really the same word in Hebrew, the Israelis were camping out, and they were based in Kadesh Barnea on the edge of the wilderness of Sin. We're in the wilderness of Sin. We're not in Kadesh Barnea, but we're not able to go to Egypt. You know, even if we went to Egypt, we can't go to Kadesh Barnea because it's on the border, right? Like within like half a mile. It's like the border patrol. So this kind of gives us a flavor of the oasis of Kadesh Barnea. From there, and the wilderness of Sin is where the spies were sent out, right? So we're not too far from that area where the spies were sent out. We're in the same wilderness area generally, right, of the wilderness of Sin. Everybody say Sin.
Sin.
There's that T-Z. In English, T-Z-I-N. In English, it comes in our Bibles as Zin, Z-I-N. And that's mentioned here in Numbers chapter 13. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send out for yourself men, so they can spy out the land of Canaan." So this land that we have been seeing all today is the land of Canaan. Today, now, the land of Israel, or Palestine, and we'll talk more about that later. So the land of Canaan, which I'm going to give to the sons of Israel. Well, Abraham was already promised this land, right? In Genesis chapter 12. He was coming through the land of Canaan, and he received that promise in a town called Shechem, or Nablus today, right? He doesn't end up settling there, even though he receives the promise. He comes down to Beersheba, right? He's a nomad, right? Eventually, when the Israelites do inherit the land, they come back to Shechem in the heart, right in between Dan and Beersheba. You look at Dan, you look at Beersheba, kind of draw a line between it. In the center of that heartland is Shechem, Nablus, where Joseph is buried. And it's there that they divide up the land. So it's very interesting how that promise is given to Abraham in Shechem, and then it's allotted in Shechem, right, here in the land of Canaan. But they're sending out the spies from down here in the south to spy out the land, to check it out from this area of the wilderness of Sin. "Send out for yourself men so they can spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, every one a leader among them." So Moses sent them out from the wilderness of Paran. So we're on the edge of Paran and Sin. So we see in verse 3 it talks about Paran, but in verse 17 it talks about Negev. And in verse 21 it says, "So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Sin." So this is where they're starting the spying out. This is a good land, right? Water coming out from the rock, right? Water plenty. And as far as Rehob, which is way up in Lebanon, Syria, at Lavo Hamat. When they had gone up into the Negev, they came to Hebron, right? And they came to the valley of Eshcol, which is the valley of the cluster of grapes, right? And they come back with that. What happens here just to the south of us when the 12 spies come back? 10 give a bad report. 2, it's a famous Bible story, right? What do they do with that? What do they do with that report? They say, we're not going to go up, right?
They're too big and bad.
And then, that's right. And then Moses says, "What? Look at you had a good report." And then what do? Then they change their mind later on, and they say, "Oh, well, maybe we can do it. Let's go up," without really consulting Moses and without consulting God. And then they get shut down and beat back and then sent all around, right? So this is an important part of the story of how they could have had direct access from where we've just traveled, basically, up to the north. They could have gone right into the heartland of Israel. Rather, they're sent around all the way we're traveling today, the land of Edom, Moab, Ammon, and only conquer from the other side. It's like coming in like this, right? Rather than straight up. And it's all because they didn't have that faith to hear the report of the 10. So this is Numbers 13. We see the valley of sin, or the wilderness of sin, again in Numbers chapter 21. I'm going to turn there. 20. It says, when the sons of Israel, the whole congregation, came to the wilderness of sin in the first month, and the people stayed at Kadesh. So here we see Kadesh Barnea, just south of us, right on the border, is linked up with the wilderness of Sin. Is it the wilderness of Paran or the wilderness of Sin? And it seems to be right on the edge. Sin being a little bit to the north, Paran a little bit being more to the east of that area. Miriam dies. And the very next verse is what? There was no water. And so the ancient sages said Miriam was such a force of blessing that with her death, faith was lessened and people were not having that miraculous water anymore, and so they were searching for the water. It's a little bit of a stretch maybe, but it's interesting to remember and tie these things together verse by verse. There was no water for the congregation. And so then we have Moses speaking to the rock, or hitting the rock. And that's why he can't go into the promised land, right? And I'm asking a trick question though. Is it the hitting that was the problem? No. A little bit. A little bit. If we look real close at the text, we see that in Psalm 106 verse 33, it says, because Moses had harsh words. What are those harsh words? Those words that were coming out of Moses are rash, not harsh. Rash words. Those words coming out of Moses' lips included him as the impetus, the generator of the water, rather than God alone. So he says, you rebels, listen now. Shall we bring forth water from the rock? That's the rash words.
Yeah.
He was tired. You know, his kids are just a pain. Have you had kids, grandchildren hit up to here with noise level? Guys, frustrated. He's just frustrated with these rebels and the fights that's going on. And he says, shall we bring water up for you? He takes God out of the primary place, puts himself up that he can generate the water and not just God. And it's because of this, which then is extended with the hitting of the rock. But really it's a heart condition and an attitude. That's right. And then out of that comes the hitting, and then he can't come in. So that's noteworthy just in this general area of Nachal Sin and of that area. We know it's a little farther south, right? But we can't go there. Questions, comments, thoughts?
When they would travel